Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. I am so thrilled to have you here today because, well, we're exploring a radically different textual analysis by author Raimundo Lizarga Verdugo. And honestly, it completely flips conventional wisdom right on its head. If you think you've got Karl Marx figured out, you might be in for a huge surprise today. We're going to look really closely at the primary source texts, and what we find is absolutely going to challenge decades of popular assumptions. I vote, gentlemen, in favor of free trade. Yep, you heard that right. That is a direct word-for-word quote from Karl Marx. Just let that sink in for a second. It kind of creates some instant cognitive dissonance, doesn't it? I mean, the man who is most famous for his critiques of the bourgeoisie, literally standing in front of a crowd and emphatically casting his vote for free trade. Okay, let's really dive into this. Was Karl Marx actually a champion of rapid capitalist expansion? This right here is the central, highly provocative question of the author's whole thesis. Did Marx actually want the machinery of capitalism to accelerate? Well, according to Lizarga Verdugo's deep dive into the original texts, the answer is a resounding yes. So, here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the great Marxist misunderstanding. Then, the engine of history, escaping the feudal past. Cheap goods as artillery, accumulation, concentration, centralization, and finally, the ultimate accelerationist. Starting off with Section 1, the Great Marxist Misunderstanding, a modern distortion. Now, before we can really understand the author's thesis, we have to clear away some modern assumptions. Impartially speaking, the modern left's typical interpretation heavily focuses on things like wealth redistribution, state intervention, and stopping or reversing capital accumulation. But relying entirely on Marx's actual writings, the author presents a completely inverted picture. He shows Marx actually advocating for rapid capital accumulation, robust free trade, and massive industrial centralization. It's literally the exact opposite. And the author, he doesn't pull any punches here. He actually labels modern intellectuals as feudal socialists. He claims that by constantly demanding state intervention and fighting against capital accumulation, they're actually betraying Marx's original intent. The argument is that modern academics have distorted Marx, preferring to live safely within state-funded university walls, rather than embracing the harsh but entirely necessary progress of industry. Crucially, the author points out that Marx never actually advocated for state control over a free economy. He saw the free market as the ultimate civilizing force, one that absolutely shouldn't be artificially slowed down. Which brings us to Section 2, the engine of history, motor of progress. Let's move to and see how this builds. If Marx didn't want the state to slow down the economy, what did he really view as the motor of progress? Well, in his original 1867 text, he wrote, "The country that is more developed industrially only shows to the less developed the image of its own future." And notice the punctuation at the end there. The author points out that Marx originally included an exclamation point. It wasn't just some dry academic observation. It showed his genuine enthusiasm and admiration for the revolutionary power of mature capitalist nations, like England, basically showing the rest of the world the way forward. This leads the author to a pretty groundbreaking premise. He argues that Das Kapital wasn't just a critique of the system. It was literally intended as an instruction manual. Marx wrote it to provide the specific economic laws and formulas for backward, underdeveloped nations so they could achieve rapid industrial success. The whole goal was to teach them how to follow England's highly successful example so they could maximize their own productive forces. Moving on to Section 3, escaping the feudal past, overcoming stagnation. So why were Marx and Engels so desperate to see these backward nations industrialize? Well, they wanted to overcome the stagnant, semi-feudal systems of their time, especially in their native Germany. Marx believed a society absolutely must pass through specific stages to do this. Step 1, you must have capital accumulation. That gathered wealth allows for Step 2, the division of labor. Then, that highly organized labor makes Step 3 possible, mass production. And it's only through mass production that you finally reach Step 4, the eradication of feudalism. You just cannot skip these steps. You need the capitalist engine to destroy the miseries of the past. So the crucial point is that Marx believed the real enemy of the working class was actually the lack of capitalism. He wrote, "We suffer not only from the development of capitalist production, but also from the incompleteness of that development. For Marx, the absolute worst-case scenario wasn't fully realized capitalism. It was being stuck halfway, suffering from both modern miseries and the stagnant inherited miseries of a semi-feudal past. Next up, Section 4. Cheap goods as artillery, the civilizing weapon. Exactly how does this capitalist machine conquer the old, stagnant world? The author leans heavily into this incredibly dynamic metaphor directly from Marx himself. The cheap prices of commodities are the heavy artillery with which it batters down all Chinese walls. I mean, just think about that imagery for a second. Cheap, mass-produced goods weren't viewed by Marx as a negative byproduct of greed, right? They were viewed as a vital, unstoppable, civilizing weapon used to literally batter down the walls of barbarianism, isolation, and global stagnation. To really fully grasp this, we need to look at Marx's definition of a commodity. He viewed it as the cellular economic form of wealth. And here's the catch. According to the author's reading, this wealth can only be efficiently produced on a massive scale by large capitalist industry. Without the massive, rapid production of commodities driven by free trade, a nation simply cannot generate wealth or become civilized. It's a non-negotiable requirement. Section 5. Accumulation, concentration, centralization, the gears of the locomotive. So what are the specific mechanical gears of this economic locomotive that actually makes mass production possible? Well, first is accumulation. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the author insists Marx saw accumulation not as a moral crime or some evil theft, but as a mandatory, natural, and highly positive prerequisite for progress. You need capital gathered in private hands to fund massive, world-changing projects. Without accumulation, innovation just stops dead in its tracks. Then we have centralization. While accumulation is kind of steady, centralization acts as a massive multiplier. It's the rapid merging of existing capital. Think of things like joint stock companies or huge credit systems. This centralization allows the bourgeoisie to achieve these Herculean tasks of modernization, like, building colossal railway networks practically overnight. That's something scattered, small-scale capital could just never achieve on its own. But why did Marx believe concentrating capital in fewer hands paradoxically improved society? Because it does a few huge things. It creates massive global markets. It lowers the cost of living by making goods immensely cheaper. It elevates science and technology to a direct productive force. It socializes labor on a massive cooperative scale. And finally, it destroys localized, highly inefficient production. Consolidating wealth is exactly what readies society for the future. And finally, Section 6, the ultimate accelerationist. Maximum speed. This whole framing presents Marx not as someone trying to put a brake on the free market system, but as someone who desperately wanted to push the pedal all the way to the metal. And to show just how orthodox this view actually used to be, the author highlights early Marxist leaders like Vladimir Lenin, who outright said, "The working class is fully interested in the broadest, freest, and most rapid development of capitalism." Orthodox Marxists didn't want to regulate capitalism to death. They demanded its rapid, unhindered expansion because they knew it was the only path forward out of poverty. And this brilliantly illustrates the author's core thesis, the accelerationist view. If you truly want to reach a post-capitalist future, you cannot stop or sabotage the capitalist machine. Actually, you must let it run at maximum speed to fully develop human productive forces. Any attempt to artificially distribute wealth, protect inefficient industries, or limit capital accumulation actually betrays progress and traps humanity in the past. Which brings us to a highly provocative question based entirely on the author's analysis. If Marx himself believed we must let the capitalist machine run at full speed to reach the future, are today's anti-capitalist policies actually holding human progress back? It is a fascinating textual argument, and one that really turns traditional political thinking completely upside down. So I'll neutrally leave you to ponder that for yourself. Has modern history completely misunderstood one of its most famous figures? Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you on the next explainer.